You are not to look at her, your grace. It is a kindness to you." Lady Vi said it in the vestry of St. Cuthbert's Church at 9 o'clock on a March morning, with the register open on the table, and the ink not yet mixed. And she said it in the ordinary voice of a woman giving directions to a coachman. "I beg your pardon," said Hollis. "The veil stays down, through the service, through the register, through the breakfast. She is used to it. She has worn it since she was 15, and she is a great deal easier in it than out." Lady Vi drew on one glove and smoothed the wrist. "You are not to be shocked, and you are not to make a face in front of the county, and above all you are not to speak to her, because she has been told not to answer. She says things. That is the whole trouble with her and always has been." There were 4 people in that vestry. The Duke of Mereford, aged 38 in his father's coat, marrying a woman he had never seen to pay off a debt of £30,000. Lady Vi, her stepmother, in violet. A curate pretending to arrange the cushions. And the bride, standing 3 feet away against the cold stone, in white, with a veil of heavy figured lace down past her collarbone. She had not moved once since he came in. "Madam," Holly said, "your daughter is in the room." "Stepdaughter, and she is perfectly aware of everything I have said, because I have said it before, and if you imagine you are being gallant, I would remind you that you are marrying her for £30,000 and a broken wall." Lady Vi picked up her prayer book. "10 minutes, your grace." She went out. The curate went out after her at speed. The Duke of Mereford had 11 months left in which to be wrong about that veil. When he learned who had put it over her face, and what it had been costing her every day since she was 15, it would be far too late to give her back one of those days. This morning he believed the worst of it had just walked out the door. The vestry was very quiet then. Hollis could hear rain on the leads, and the organ being pumped somewhere beyond the wall, and the fire in the little grate, which was small and mean and doing nothing. "Miss Kern." "Nothing." "Miss Kern, I am going to say one thing, and then I shall leave you in peace. I know how this looks. I know exactly what I am and what my father did to your father's money, and I know that you are here because a contract signed before either of us could walk says you must be." He turned his hat over in his hands. "If you tell me now, in this room, that you would rather not, I will go out there and stop it, and I will find another way to pay £30,000, or I will go down owing it. You have my word. Say the word no, and it does not happen." The veil moved very slightly. She had turned her head. "They are all in the church," she said. Her voice was low and unhurried and entirely steady, and it was the first surprise of that day, because it was not the voice of a woman who had spent 11 years being told to be quiet. "They are 200 of them, and you would go out and stop it." "I would." "Why?" "Because I do not care to be married by ambush," said Hollis, "and neither, I imagine, do you." There was a pause of perhaps 4 seconds. "No," said Rosalind Kern. "Do not stop it. I have my own reasons, and they are not yours, and I do not propose to discuss them in a vestry." A breath. "But you may as well know from the beginning that I was not told not to answer. I was told not to speak. There is a difference, and I have kept to it for 11 years, and I am extremely tired of it." Then she walked past him and out into the church. They were married at 9:20. It went as those things go. He said his part, and she said hers, low and clear, and the curate's hands shook, and 200 people leaned very slightly forward every time the lace moved. And at the rail, when it was done, before they turned round to walk back down through all of it, Hollis bent his head and said the thing he had had no intention whatever of saying. "Lift your veil." He said it quietly. It was not meant for the church. Her chin came up, He saw the lace shift with her breath and stop. Here, here, not in a vestry with your stepmother telling me what I may look at. Here, at the rail, in front of every one of them once, and then it is done forever and nobody in this county ever gets to be curious again. He paused. Or say no, and I will walk you out under it, and I will never ask again as long as I live. That is a promise and I keep them. 2 seconds. Then Rosalind Kern put back her own veil with her own 2 hands. The left side of her face and throat were burned. Old burns, 10 years old, silvered and drawn, the skin puckered from the cheekbone down under the collar of the gown, the corner of the eye pulled a little out of true. The left hand that had lifted the lace was scarred to the wrist, and the last 2 fingers did not straighten. That was not why the Duke of Mereford stopped breathing. He stopped breathing because she was looking straight at him. Not down, not away, not braced for it, at him, dry-eyed, with her chin up and her mouth perfectly level, waiting to see what he would do with his face. And behind the waiting there was something so cold and so completely unbroken that he felt it go through his coat like weather. He had stood in front of a French battery at Vimero. He had never in his life been looked at like that. He did not breathe for what the parish afterwards agreed was a very long moment. Then he took her burned left hand in both of his and turned it over and set his mouth to the palm of it, in the middle of the scar, in front of 200 people. And then he put her hand through his arm and walked his wife down the aisle. Nobody said one word until they were out under the porch. It would be 11 months before the Duke of Mereford found out what that veil had really been hiding, and it was not her face. By the time he understood it, he would have said a thing to her in his own hall, in front of his own servants, that could not be reached by any apology he was capable of writing. She would be gone before it was light, and he would have to go and find her alone in a village he had never heard of, and stand in the road with his hat off, and be told no. But that was the following February. This was the 14th of March, and the rain had stopped, and Holly stood in the porch of St. Cuthbert's with his wife's hand on his arm, and 100 people coming out behind them, not knowing where to put their eyes. Lady Vi came out forth. She looked at the veil, which was lying back over Rosalind's hair like any other bride's, and something happened in her face which Holly's was to think about a great deal in the months afterwards. It was not embarrassment. It was not even anger. It was fear, and it was gone in half a second. "Well," said Lady Vi, "that was very theatrical, your grace." "It was, rather. I am told I am like my mother." "You will find the novelty wears." "Very likely." And then a girl of about 20 came out past her mother's shoulder in blue, gold-haired, bright as a new shilling, and caught Rosalind's hands, both of them, the burned one too, and said, "Oh, Rosalind, you look so well, you do, you look so well," in a voice that was on the very edge of breaking, and Rosalind stood absolutely still and let herself be held. "My sister Blanche," she said over the girl's head. "She is the pretty one. Everybody says so, so it saves time if I say it first." "Rosalind, don't." "I am not being unkind, Blanche. It is only true." Holly's, watching, saw the younger girl's face for one unguarded instant before it turned into a wedding face again, and he could not read it at all. He handed his wife into the carriage. They were 4 miles out of the village before either of them spoke, and it was Rosalind who did it. "You will want to know about the fire," she said. "I would rather you told me at your own time." "Everybody says that." She was looking out of the window at the hedges going by. "Nobody means it." Mereford stood in a shallow valley with a lake in front of it, and a wall round 1,100 acres, and about 2/3 of it was shut up. Hollies showed her the two-thirds first, which his man of business told him afterwards was madness, and which he never regretted. The east front is sound, the rest is not. There has been water coming through the roof of the long gallery since my father's time, and I have had buckets under it for 6 years. He unlocked a door onto a corridor of shrouded furniture and cold air. This is what your father's £30,000 was to have mended, and my father spent it on horses and a house in Brook Street. I want you to see it before anybody in the county tells you I am a rich man. Rosalind walked the length of the gallery with her hands behind her back, looking up. How many people live on this estate? 340, near enough. And if you had not married me, then the trustees of your father's settlement would have called in the debt at midsummer, and I should have sold the low farms, and about 90 of the 340 would have gone somewhere else. He said it without any particular emphasis. That is not a claim on you, madam. It is only the answer to your question. It is a claim on me, said Rosalind. It is exactly a claim on me. I should rather have it plainly than have it wrapped. Mr. Fiske laid the whole of it before her the next morning at the estate table, because Hollies told him to, and because Rosalind sat down and would not be got up. The contract had been signed in the year 6 between Hollies's father and Sir Anselm Kern, who had made a great deal of money out of Bristol and wanted a coronet in the family. The Kern money against the Mereford name, the eldest Kern daughter to the Mereford heir. Sir Anselm had paid over £30,000 on the day of signature. The old Duke had spent it in 4 years. Sir Anselm had died in the fire in the year 16, and his widow had become the trustee of everything. And the trustees had been perfectly civil for 10 years, and had begun, last autumn, to be less so. And my own portion, said Rosalind. Fiske turned a page and went carefully. £12,000, your grace, under your father's will, payable on your marriage, provided that the marriage has the consent in writing of your father's widow as trustee. He cleared his throat. There is a clause following it. If at any time before payment the beneficiary should be found by a proper authority to be of unsound mind, or incapable of the management of her own affairs, the fund does not go to her at all. It stays where it is, under the trustee's hand, for her maintenance, at the trustee's discretion for life. Hollies looked up from the window. That is an ugly clause. It was a common clause, your grace, in a settlement drawn in the year 6 for a gentleman with young daughters. Fiske put his pen down. It is uglier now than it was then. Lady Vi gave her consent to this marriage on the 10th of February. Until the 12,000 is actually paid over, that clause is still alive. Then get it paid over. I have asked 3 times. The trustee's attorney answers that the fund is in the 4% and cannot be broken until the dividend day in July. July, said Rosalind. She said it as though she were noting a train of thought, and then she folded her hands and said nothing more about it at all, and Hollies remembered that afterwards too. He heard the county's version of the fire within a fortnight, 3 separate times, and it was word for word the same on each telling, which is how you know a story has been given out rather than grown. Kern Hall, the East Wing, a night in October in the year 16. Miss Rosalind, 15, had been forbidden a lamp in her bedroom because she read half the night and the household could not afford the oil, and she had taken one up anyway and knocked it into the bed curtains and run. The wing had gone in 40 minutes. Her father had got out onto the lawn and had gone back in for the deed box in his book room and had not come out again. The younger girl had been carried out by a servant. And Miss Rosalind had been found on the wet grass with her face and hands burned, and had never once, in 10 years, said that it had happened any other way. She does not deny it. An old woman told him at his own table, kindly, meaning to be helpful. That is the sad part, your grace. If she denied it, one might make something of it. Lady Vi's instructions had come to Mereford ahead of the bride, in writing, to the housekeeper. Hollis found them by accident on the fourth day, in the still room, in his stepmother-in-law's beautiful upright hand. The fires in her grace's rooms were to be kept low and screened. Candles were not to be left in her bedchamber or her dressing room at any time. She was not to be alone in a room with a lamp. Somebody was to sleep within call. And none of these directions were to be mentioned to her grace, who would only be distressed by them. Holly stood in the still room and read it twice, and then went and found the housekeeper. "Has this been done?" "It has, your grace, since Tuesday." "Undo it, all of it, tonight. Put the candles back in her rooms, build the fires up like anybody else's, and if her grace asks you why they were ever different, tell her the truth and tell her I told you to." That was the 4th of April. On the 5th they dined at Mereford for the first time with company. 11 at table, the vicar and his wife, 2 neighboring families come to look at the bride, and a great dressed epergne in the middle of the cloth with dried grasses and honesty in it, because the gardens had nothing yet. The talk was careful, and the candles were high, and the footman reaching between 2 chairs with the sauce caught the branch with his elbow. The candle went over into the dried grass, and the whole center of the table stood up in flame. Somebody screamed. Somebody else, the vicar, as it turned out, snatched up a decanter of water, which is the very worst thing a man can do to burning oil and dry stuff in a silver dish, and got as far as raising it. Rosalind was already standing. She took the folded damask napkin from beside her plate, opened it with a flick, dropped it flat over the whole burning center, and pressed it down with both hands, the burned one and the whole one, and held it there, while the flame went out under it in about 3 seconds. Then she lifted a corner, looked, put it back, and said, without raising her voice at all, "Not water. Water spreads the oil and throws it into the laps of the ladies on both sides. Smother it, and hold on longer than you think you need to." A pause. "Sir, I would put that decanter down. Somebody will want a drink presently, and it had better be you." Nobody said anything for about 5 seconds. Then everybody said everything at once. Later, when the company had gone and the epergne had been taken away, and the cloth had a black hole in it the size of a dinner plate, Hollis found his wife on the terrace in the cold, with her hands wrapped in her shawl. "Where," he said, "does a gentleman's daughter learn that?" Rosalind looked out at the black lake. "I have done it before," she said. He learned her the way a man learns a house he has come to late, room by room, in no order, and mostly by walking into things. She rode at 5:30 in the morning, before the grooms were properly up, because at 5:30 there was nobody on the road to look at her. When Hollis discovered it, he did not say a word about it, and did not offer to come, and simply began to be in the stable yard at 5:30 himself with his own horse saddled, reading a letter, entirely by coincidence, 4 mornings running, until she said, "You may as well come, you are frightening the boy." And after that they rode out together, and it became the best hour of his day. Her left hand ached before rain, and the whole of that side of her face tightened in cold. She would not wear a glove on the left because the 2 fingers that did not straighten made a glove a torment, so she rode with a bare hand in November, and when he had a gauntlet cut and made for her at Northampton, wide across the palm and open at the last 2 fingers, she turned it over twice and put it on and said, "Thank you," and then went out and was gone 2 hours, and came back with her eyes red and rode past him into the stable without a word, and neither of them ever mentioned it again. She had an eye for building that he could not account for. She stood under the leaking roof of the long gallery for half an hour in May, and then told him that the trouble was not the roof, but the lead of the parapet gutter, and that a man had been paid twice for work he had not done in the year 21, and she could show him where in the account book. She could. The gallery was dry by August for £109, having been quoted 1100. She went unveiled everywhere. That was the thing the county could not get over. At the Michaelmas assembly at Barhold, an old woman in purple asked her, very sweetly, whether she might not find it more comfortable to wear something over it for the dancing. "Comfortable for whom, ma'am?" said Rosalind. "Why, for yourself, my dear." "I have worn a veil for 11 years, said the Duchess of Mereford. "I did not once find that it made the burns hurt less. It only made everybody stare at the place where my face was not, which took them longer, and gave them more to say afterwards. I would rather they got it over in 10 seconds and went back to the wine." She smiled. "Which they have. You are the only person in this room still at it, ma'am." Holly's heard about that from 4 separate people before the end of the week, and enjoyed it more each time. Once in June, riding home along the top of the hanger with the hay down in the valley, and the whole of Mereford laid out below them, he asked her, "Rosalind, will you tell me about the fire?" She rode 100 yards before answering. "I have told that story so many times that I cannot hear it any more," she said. "It goes past me like the creed. If you want a different one, you will have to go and find it yourself, and it will cost you something, and I do not know that it is worth what it will cost. Let me be the judge of that." "No," said Rosalind, and touched her horse into a canter, and that was the end of it for 8 months. He should have gone and found it in June. He has said so since, more than once, and always in the same flat voice. Lady Vi came in July. She came for 6 weeks with Blanche, who was to be presented in the spring, and who needed the Mereford connection about her like a coat. And Holly's, who had said no twice by letter, said yes on the third asking because his wife told him to. "She is my father's widow and Blanche is my sister," Rosalind said. "If we shut the door, the county will decide there is something behind it, and the county will be right, and it will not be a thing of my choosing." She was pinning a map to the estate table as she said it. "Let her come. Let her sit in my drawing-room and eat my dinner and see me unveiled at the head of my own table for 6 weeks. It will do her more harm than any door I could shut." It was, Holly's thought, an excellent plan, and it went wrong within 9 days, and he was the ground it went wrong in. Lady Vi did not attack. That was what he was slow to understand. She never once said a hard word about Rosalind in his hearing. She worried. She worried over the tea things that dear Rosalind rode out so early and quite alone. She worried that the west rooms had candles in them again, and hoped she had not been officious in the spring, but one did like to sleep at night. She worried that the county was so kind and Rosalind so proud, and that pride of that particular sort was very often the thing one saw before well. She would say no more. And then in the 4th week, at the end of a long hot day, she said the other thing. "You will not have heard about Rexcombe," she said. "Rexcombe. It is nothing. It was all hushed up and quite properly, and I ought not to have mentioned it." She gathered her work-box. "I am an old fool, your grace, and I have been in the sun." "Madam, what is Rexcombe?" Lady Vi sat down again, as though the words were being dragged out of her, which they were not. "It is a school in Dorset. We sent her there when she was 17, 2 years after Kern. It was a very good school. She was there 11 weeks. She looked at her hands. There was a fire in the linen room. Nobody was hurt, God be thanked. It was put out. But it was the linen room, your grace, which is a room with no chimney and no lamp in it, and no earthly reason for a fire to begin in it at all. And my stepdaughter was found in the passage outside it with her hands black, and she would not say one word about why she was there. That is the whole of it. That is the whole of it, and I have carried it for 9 years, and now you have it too, and I am sorry for it." She rose. She was fetched home the next day. It was not spoken of again. "You will oblige me by not raising it with her, because she is happy here, your grace. She is happier than I have ever seen her, and I would not spoil that for the world." Holly sat on the terrace for a long time after she had gone up. He knew, even then, what he was doing. That is the part he cannot get round. He knew that he was being handed something, carefully, by a woman whose interest in the matter was £12,000 in the 4%, and he knew that the sensible course was to write to Rexcombe himself in the morning, and say nothing to anybody until he had an answer. He went in and found his wife at the estate table with the parapet accounts, and stood in the doorway, and said it. "Rosalind, what happened at Rexcombe?" She put down her pen. All the color went out of the unburned side of her face, so that for one moment the two halves of it matched, and she looked up at him with an expression he had seen exactly once before, at a church rail in March. "Who," she said, "told you that word?" "My stepmother told me," said Hollis. "Yes." Rosalind put the cap on the ink. "Sit down, then. You may as well have it since you have had her version, and hers is shorter and better told." "Rosalind, sit down." He sat down. "There was a girl at Rexcombe called Peg Dorrit," she said. "She was a charity pupil, which at that school meant she did the linen and slept over the wash house, and if she broke a thing, she paid for it out of a wage she did not get. She had washed her only shift, and she was drying it in the linen room over a rushlight, which is a thing everybody did and nobody admitted, and she had gone off to her bed and left it. And you were passing." "I was on the stairs. I know what it smells like before there is anything to see, and I always will, and there is no help for that." She looked at him levelly. "It was a shift and a shelf and about a yard of the wall. I had it out in 2 minutes with a blanket off the press. The whole of it would have gone up my arm in another 4, because linen rooms are the worst rooms in any house, and if it had reached the press with the sheets in it, the school would have burned to the ground with 40 girls asleep over it. And when they found you in the passage with your hands black, they asked me why I was there, and I did not answer because the answer was Peg Dorrit's name, and Peg Dorrit would have been turned out of the only roof she had, and I was 17, and I had already learned what happens to a girl who is blamed for a fire." Rosalind shrugged with one shoulder. "So I said nothing. And they wrote to my stepmother, and my stepmother came and fetched me home in a closed carriage in 11 hours. And she has had that story in her workbox for 9 years, and has taken it out this evening." Hollis found he had his hands over his face. "I am sorry," he said. "I have been used like a lock, and I let myself be. I ought to have written to Rexcombe and said nothing to you until I had an answer." "Yes," said Rosalind, "you ought." Then, after a moment, in a slightly different voice, "But you asked me, to my face, in my own room, with the door open. That is the first time anybody has asked me anything to my face in 11 years. They ask each other, so I find that I mind less than I expected to, and I would be obliged if you would not make me say so twice." Lady Vi and Blanche went home on the 2nd of September. That autumn was the best time of Hollis's life, and he knew it while it was happening, which is rare and which he has always been grateful for. The gallery roof held. The tenants got their dinner in November, and Rosalind sat at the foot of the table and made a speech about drains that was quoted in 3 parishes. They rode out at 5:30 in the frost. She began teaching him what she knew about lead and gutters, and he began teaching her what he knew about horses, and both of them were bad pupils, and it did not matter. And there was a night in the library in December when the wind was up, and he told her about his brother. He had not told anybody, not in 11 years. Edward had been the elder by 2 years and had died at Corunna, and Holly's had been the one who had bought him the colors, and had argued him into it over a fortnight, and had won the argument. "And so I have this house," he said, "and the wall and the debt, and the 340 people, because I was persuasive at 23. Rosalind was quiet a long time. Then she pulled off the gauntlet on her left hand and put the hand out, palm up, on the table between them, which was a thing he had never once seen her do. "You may hold that," she said, "if you like. It is the only useful thing I have." He held it. He held it for a long time, and he did not look away from it, and he did not say any of the things people said. And after a while she turned her hand over so that it lay in his, and the fire went down, and neither of them rang for anybody to build it up. He did not sleep in the east front that night, nor after. They had 11 weeks of that. In January, Mr. Fiske reported that the £12,000 had not been paid on the July dividend, nor on the January one, and that the trustee's attorney now wrote of a difficulty about a reinvestment. Rosalind heard him out with her chin on her hand. "Mr. Fiske, who audits my father's trust." "The trustee, your grace." "And who examines the trustee?" "Nobody, your grace, unless a beneficiary applies to Chancery." "And a beneficiary, who has been found incapable of managing her own affairs, cannot apply to Chancery at all." Fiske looked at the table. "No, your grace." "No," said Rosalind, "quite so." She began writing to Bristol that week. Holly's knew, because he franked the letters. He did not ask what was in them, and she did not tell him, and he had learned by then that she came to a thing in her own time and could not be hurried an inch. Lady Vi wrote at the end of January to say that she and Blanche would come to Mereford for a fortnight in February before the presentation, and that she trusted dear Rosalind's health was holding up in this bitter weather. "Tell her yes," said Rosalind. "Must I?" "Yes, there is something I want to look at while she is in the house, and I want her under this roof when I look at it." "Rosalind." "Ask me in a week," she said. "Ask me properly, and I will tell you the whole of it, and I think you will not like it. But I want to be sure first, because if I am wrong I shall have said an unforgivable thing about my sister's mother in my husband's house." They came on the 9th of February, in sleet. On the 10th Rosalind spent 4 hours in the muniment room at Mereford with the year 6 papers, the contract, and Sir Anselm Kearns covering letters to the old Duke, 30 of them, tied in the original tape. On the night of the 11th, at about 1 in the morning, Holly's woke to somebody hammering on a door and a woman screaming in the west passage, and the smell that a man knows at once even out of a dead sleep. The estate room at Mereford was on fire. They had it out in 20 minutes, and the house never caught. Holly's got there in his shirt to find the passage full of men with buckets, and the estate room door standing open, and his wife inside it in her nightgown with a hearth rug in both hands, beating along the base of the shelves. And he pulled her out of it by the arm, and she fought him for 3 strides, and then stopped and let herself be pulled, which frightened him more than the fire did. It was out by 1:10. The room was black to the ceiling on one side. The estate maps had gone, and a shelf of Sessions papers, and the deed cupboard was scorched but held. And the year 6 papers, the contract, and Sir Anselm Kearns' 30 covering letters, tied in the original tape, which had been on the table under the window since the 10th, were a lump of gray ash in the shape of a bundle. The household stood about in the hall afterwards in the way that households do, with candles, in coats over nightclothes, saying nothing. Blanche was on the stairs. She had been crying so hard that she could barely get it out, and she got it out anyway, in front of 11 servants, in a high, shaking voice. "I saw her," she said. "I am so sorry. Oh, Rosalind, I am so sorry. I saw you go in with a candle. It was midnight. I was on the landing, and I saw you go in with a candle and shut the door." Lady Vi said nothing whatever. That was the thing Hollis understood far too late, that she did not say one word, that night or afterwards. She stood at the foot of the stairs in her wrapper with her hand at her throat and let her daughter do it, and looked at her son-in-law with an expression of pure, patient, sorrowing sympathy. Rosalind stood in the middle of the hall in a scorched nightgown with her hair down and her hands black. "Rosalind," said Hollis, "were you in that room tonight?" "Yes." "With a candle?" "With a candle. I have been in it every night this week. You know that." And he should have stopped there. He has gone over it perhaps 4,000 times since, and every time it ends in the same place. There was a door in that sentence, and he had his hand on it, and he opened the wrong one. "Did you set it?" The hall was so quiet that he heard the clock in the passage. He watched it happen. He watched something come down behind his wife's eyes like a sash window, and he would have given the whole estate, and the wall and every acre of it, to have the words back before they had finished leaving him. "You have asked me," said Rosalind. "That is the whole of it. There is nothing after that." "Answer me." "No," she said. "I have answered that question for 11 years by not being asked it, which is the only way it has ever been survivable. You have asked it, in your hall in front of your people at 2 in the morning. She looked round at them all slowly, and every one of them looked at the floor. "I did not set your fire. Believe that or do not. It makes no difference now." And then Hollis, who was frightened, and who had been awake for an hour, and who could still smell it in his own house, turned to the housekeeper and said the last thing. "No lights are to be left in the west rooms." There was a sound from somewhere on the stairs, he never knew who, and Rosalind's face did not change at all. "You gave that order once before," she said, "in April, in this house, in her hand, and you tore it up and told the housekeeper to tell me the truth about it. It was the best thing anybody had ever done for me, and I have not told you so until this moment, and now I never shall again." She went upstairs. She was gone before it was light. She took the 6 o'clock mail from the turnpike, which meant she had walked the 2 miles to it in the dark in February. She took one small box. She left her rings on the dressing table, and the gauntlet from Northampton folded on the estate table in the burnt room, on top of the parapet accounts, squared up. She left 11 words, in pencil, on the back of a bill. "I have gone to find the different story. Do not follow me." Hollis followed her. He was at the turnpike by 9, and at the posting house by 11, and he lost her at Northampton, where the mail had gone on and where nobody had noticed a lady traveling alone, because she had been traveling inside with a veil down for the first time in a year. And that was the single most unbearable thing he learned that entire month. He went to Bristol, because Bristol was where her letters had gone, and he had franked them himself and had not read one of them. Nobody in Bristol had seen her. He came home on the 21st with nothing, and found that his household had gone strange and quiet, and that Lady Vi and Blanche had removed to the George at Barhold, so as not to intrude on his Grace's trouble, and were being extremely visible there. He sold 2 hunters, and put the money into hiring men to ask questions in 4 counties, which he now thinks was the least useful thing he did in his life, and which he does not regret either. She had no money to speak of. That was the thought that got at him at 3 in the morning. Her £12,000 was sitting in the 4% under her stepmother's hand. She had left her rings on the table. She had walked out of Mereford with a box and whatever was in her own purse, which he did not know, and which turned out, he learned it in April, from a jeweler at Bath, to have been supplemented by the sale of a mourning brooch with her mother's hair in it, for £4.15. Fisk came to him on the 24th of February, and stood in the doorway of the burnt room until Hollies noticed him. "Your Grace, I have been 3 days deciding whether to bring you this." "Bring it." "You will remember I have been pressing the trustee's attorney for the 12,000. On Tuesday his clerk sent me the wrong bundle." Fisk laid a copied sheet on the table. "It is a letter from Lady Vi to a physician in Wimpole Street. It is dated the 10th of February, the day before the fire, and it asks him what evidence would be required to move a commission in lunacy against a lady of rank, and whether the evidence of a sister would answer, and what his fee would be for attending in the country." Holly stood looking at it for a long moment. Then he took his coat off the chair. "Get your hat," he said. "We are going to Wrexcombe, and after Wrexcombe we are going to Kern, and I want the name of every servant who was in that house on the night of the fire in the year 16, and I want the surgeon who dressed her, and I do not care what any of it costs." It took them 7 weeks, and it was mostly Fisk, who turned out to be a man of extraordinary patience and no imagination whatever, which is the exact combination the work required. Wrexcombe first. The school was under a new mistress, but the old matron was alive at Blandford and remembered it perfectly, and had always thought it a shame. Peg Dorrit was traced through 3 places to a farm near Sherborne, where she was 30 and married and had 4 rooms and a settle. And when Fisk explained why he had come, she sat down on the settle and cried, and then dictated a statement of 11 lines and signed it in a good round hand, and would not take a shilling for it. Then Kern. The hall was let to a manufacturer, and the east wing had never been rebuilt. It stood open to the sky at the end of the terrace with elder growing out of the chimney breast, and Hollies walked round it twice in the rain. The surgeon who had dressed the burns in the year 16 had been dead 9 years, but his son had the practice and the case books, all of them, ledger after ledger in a cupboard, and he found the entry in 40 minutes. Hollies read it standing at the window. October 21st. Attended at Kern Hall upon Miss R. Kern, eat. 15. Burns to the left cheek, ear and neck deep, to the left hand and wrist deep, to both palms and to the inner surfaces of both forearms, extensive with blistering, consistent with the carrying of a burning weight. N.B. The patient's night shift is scorched heavily at the front from the knee upward and scarcely at all behind. This is not consistent with an escape from a burning chamber, in which case a patient will be marked behind. I have said so to her ladyship, who tells me that I am mistaken. Her ladyship tells me that I am mistaken, Holly said aloud, to nobody. The servants of the year 16 had gone to the Four Winds, but the last item in the household book was the payment of a year's wages in a lump, in November of that year, to Anne Coombe, nurse, 22 years in the family, with the note, against it, on leaving the county. It took Fisk 5 weeks to find her. Thurn is a village on the edge of the fen with 11 houses, a church with no tower, and a great deal of sky. And Hollies got there on the 19th of April in the late afternoon, with the light coming flat across the reeds. Nan Coombe was 71, and lived in the second cottage with a stove and a canary, and she opened the door herself. "You'll be the Duke," she said. "I am." "You're 3 weeks late." She stood back from the door. "Come in, then, and wipe your feet, for she'll be down directly, and she'll have something to say about the floor." Holly stood in a Fenland kitchen with his hat in his hand, and his heart going like a hammer. "She is here." "She's been here since the 4th of March, said Nan Coombe. "Came off the Norwich coach in the rain with a box and £4 in her purse and knocked at that door and said, 'Nan, I have come for the truth, and you are the only one left who has it.' And I said, 'God be praised, I have been waiting 11 years to be asked.'" The old woman sat down heavily by the stove. "Sit you down, your grace. You'd best have it from me first, because she can't tell it. She's told the other one so long that this one won't come out of her mouth. It comes out of mine." And she told him. The lamp was Blanche's. Blanche was 11 years old on the night of the 20th of October in the year 16. She had been given the lamp to carry up to bed, and she had been told, twice, to put it out on the landing table, and instead she had taken it into the box room at the end of the east passage, where her mother's old gowns hung in a press, because she liked to look at them, and had been forbidden that too. She had set it on the floor. She had pulled a sleeve of muslin down across it. Rosalind was 15, and reading in the room below with no lamp at all, because she was not allowed one. "She went up them stairs," said Nan Coombe, "against the smoke, and she come out along that passage with Blanche across her shoulder and her 2 hands under her, and the passage was going over their heads the whole way. And I was on the lawn, your grace, and I saw them come out of the door, and I saw where the fire was on her, and I have seen a great many burns in my life, and I knew at once what I was looking at. She carried her sister out. That's all them marks are. That's all they've ever been. And her father—" Sir Anselm was out on the grass before either of them. He went back for the deed box in his book room, and he never come out again, and there wasn't a soul could have stopped him, and no one that saw it has ever said different. Nan Coombe's mouth worked. 2 days after we buried him, her ladyship took that girl into the morning room at the lodge and shut the door. I was in the passage with the linen, and I heard the whole of it, and I've heard it every night since." "What did she say to her?" "She said, 'Blanche is 11 years old. If it is known whose lamp it was, she will be the girl who killed her father, and she will be that at every party and every table and every funeral until she is an old woman, and she will not survive it, and you know she will not.' She said, 'You are marked already, my dear. It cannot be worse for you than it is.' She said, 'Say the lamp was yours, and you may live in this house and see your sister every day of your life. Say anything else, and I am her mother, and you are nothing to her, and you will not come within a mile of her again.'" Holly sat with his hands on his knees. "And the veil," he said. Nan Coombe looked at him steadily. "Now that's the piece nobody sees, your grace, and I've turned it over these 11 years. Her ladyship never put that veil on her to spare her feelings, whatever she told the county. She put it on so that nobody would ever get near enough to ask. A veiled girl is a story. Folk look at the lace, and they tell each other what's behind it, and they go home satisfied. But an uncovered woman sitting up at the head of a table where a man can see her mouth while she talks," the old woman spread her hands. "Somebody, some day, was going to say to that face, my dear, that is not the mark of a lamp. It never was her face she was hiding, sir. It was the answer." There was a step on the stair. Holly's got up so fast that the chair went over behind him. Rosalind stopped 3 steps from the bottom, in a plain stuff gown with her sleeves rolled and flowered to the elbow, and looked at him. He did not tell her about the case book. He did not tell her about Peg Dorrit, or the household ledger, or the letter to Wimpole Street. He had rehearsed all of it for 110 miles, and he put every word of it down. "I was wrong in my hall on the 11th of February, said the Duke of Mereford. "I would have been wrong if every paper in England had come out and said otherwise. I have not come here to bring you evidence. I have come to say that in front of your face, and then to go and stand outside until you tell me what you want done." Rosalind came down the last 3 steps. "Sit down," she said. Her voice was not quite level. "Nan has made tea and it is horrible, and we have a great deal to arrange, because whatever is done must be done in front of my sister, and it must be done before the 12th of May. "What is the 12th of May?" "The day she is to be presented," said Rosalind, "on my mother's money, in a room full of people, by a woman who is going to stand behind her and look proud. I have been 11 years keeping Blanche's life together with my 2 hands, and I am not going to break it now." She sat down at the table. "But she is 21 in June. She is not a child of 11 anymore. And she stood on a staircase in February and told your servants she had seen me go in with a candle, and I want to know, I want it in front of witnesses, whether my sister believes that or whether she has been told it. It was done at Mereford on the 24th of April, in the hall, because that was the room it had been done in. Holly's had the same servants in it, all 11, standing where they had stood at 2 o'clock in the morning on the 11th of February, which he had asked them to do, and which not one of them had refused. He had a magistrate from Barhold. He had the surgeon's son with the case book under his arm, and Peg Dorrit up from Sherborne in her best bonnet, and Nan Coombe in the good chair with a footstool, because she had come 110 miles at 71. He had about 30 of the county, who had been invited to nothing, and had come anyway, which is what the county is for. And he had Lady Vi and Blanche, who had been sent for from the George at Barhold, and who came, because not coming would have been the first answer. Holly stood in the middle of his own hall. "On the 11th of February," he said, "in this room, at 2 in the morning, in front of every person now standing along that wall, I asked my wife whether she had set fire to my estate room. Those were the words. I am going to unsay them in the same room in front of the same people, because that is the only place a thing like that can be unsaid, and because it will take rather longer than it took to say." Then he sat down and let Mr. Fiske do it, which was the wisest decision he made that year. Fiske read the surgeon's entry of the 21st of October in the year 16, in his flat clerk's voice, twice, including the last line. "This is not consistent with an escape from a burning chamber. I have said so to her ladyship, who tells me that I am mistaken." He put Peg Dorrit up, who told the linen room at Wrexcombe in 11 lines, and then, unasked, added a 12th. "She never told them my name, ma'am, not that day nor since. I was 14, and I'd have been on the road that night." He read Nan Coombe's statement, sworn before a magistrate at Thurn on the 4th of March, and he said, before he read it, precisely how it had been come by. That the Duchess of Mereford had gone to Thurn alone, on the public coach, in the first week of March, having sold a mourning brooch containing her mother's hair for £4 15s, that being the whole of her fortune at the time, her portion of £12,000 being then, as now, in the hands of the trustee sitting in the 3rd chair from the window. Something went round that hall, then, that Holly's felt on the back of his neck. Lady Vi did not flinch. He had to give her that, and he has always given it to her. "An old servant paid to leave the county 11 years ago," she said pleasantly. "A dead doctor's handwriting, and a farm woman with a grievance. My stepdaughter has had 10 weeks and my daughter's whole future to work with, and this is what she brings back. I am sorry for her. I have been sorry for her since she was 15. "Then let it be the last thing," said Rosalind. She had been standing by the stairs the whole time, and had not spoken once. She crossed to where Blanche was sitting, and knelt down in front of her chair, and took both her hands, the scarred one and the whole one. "Blanche, I am going to ask you 2 things, and then it is finished either way, And whatever you answer, I shall be your sister on Friday exactly as I was on Thursday. And I want the whole room to hear me say that first." Blanche's face was terrible. "On the 11th of February," said Rosalind, "on the landing at midnight. What did you actually see?" "A candle." It came out of her in a whisper. "A candle and a wrapper and the back of somebody's head going in at the door." "Whose head?" "I don't know," said Blanche. "I have never known. I was on the landing and Mamma came up behind me and said, 'You saw your sister.' And I said it because she said it. She was shaking. The way I have said everything since I was 11 years old." The magistrate wrote. "And the other thing," said Rosalind, "the box room at Kern, your mother's gowns in the press. The 20th of October." And Blanche looked at her sister's burned face from about 10 inches away, and something in her that had been held shut for 11 years came off its hinges. "It was my lamp," she said. She said it 3 times. The third time she said it loudly enough for the men at the back of the hall. "It was my lamp. I took it in to look at the gowns. I pulled the sleeve down on it and I ran, and Rosalind came up the stairs for me, and I have known it every single day since I was 11, and I let her wear it, and I let them put that veil on her, and I stood on a staircase in February and let them say it again." She had her sister's hands crushed against her own face. "Mamma said it would kill me to be known for it. It has killed me anyway. It has just taken 11 years. Lady Vi stood up. "Sit down, madam," said the magistrate, without heat, and she sat down, and Fiske read the letter of the 10th of February to Wimpole Street, about what evidence would be required to move a commission in lunacy against a lady of rank, and whether the evidence of a sister would answer. And after that, nobody in the hall looked at her at all, which is the worst thing a county can do to a woman. She left Mereford that evening. Rosalind would not have her prosecuted for the estate room. There was a candle box from the blue bedchamber found in the shrubbery by the under gardener, and a scorched slipper, and the magistrate was perfectly willing, and Rosalind said no, and said it once, and would not discuss it. What she did instead was apply to Chancery for an account of her father's trust, and for the removal of the trustee, and she got both by Michaelmas, and the £12,000 came in with 3,000 more of arrears that had never been paid over. And Lady Vi retired to Bath on an annuity which her stepdaughter settled on her, and which she has drawn every quarter for 9 years, and which the county has never been able to understand. "She is Blanche's mother," Rosalind said when Hollis asked. "That is all. I am not doing it for her." Blanche was not presented in May. She went to an aunt in Yorkshire and wrote every week, and Rosalind answered the 11th letter, and then the 12th, and it was 2 years before either of them was easy. And she is married now to a clergyman near Ripon who is a great deal better than she thinks she deserves, and they come at Christmas, and there are still evenings when she cannot look at her sister across a room. It is not Mendied. It is being Mendied, which Rosalind says is a different thing and the only one on offer. The scars have not changed. They ache before rain, and the 2 fingers do not straighten, and the gauntlet from Northampton is on its 3rd pair, and there is not and never was any cure for any of it, and nobody at Mereford has ever suggested there ought to be. The long gallery is dry. The low farms were never sold. There are 361 people on that estate now, and the 90 who would have gone are not gone. She keeps the estate room. It was made good in the summer, and the burnt shelf was replaced with a new one, and she would not have the mark on the ceiling painted out. And on an evening in the December after it was all over, sitting by the fire in the long gallery with the wind up, Rosalind fetched the veil down out of a drawer, the heavy-figured lace, 11 years of it, and looked at it for a while, and then put it on the fire, and knelt on the hearth and watched it go, from a foot away, without moving back an inch and without blinking once. Holly stood behind her chair and watched his wife watch it burn. "You asked me to lift it," she said, "at the rail in front of 200 people, and I have thought about it a great deal since. You had no idea what you were asking me to take off." "No," said the Duke of Mereford, "but you did, and you did it anyway in about 2 seconds, and I have not got my breath back yet."